So today, Congress reconvened after a 5-week hiatus. Now that the election is over, there are many foreign policy issues that need to be addressed, with new legislation put forward. But have you ever asked yourself if U.S. legislation is even created by lawmakers anymore? It's a good question to consider when you know that millions of dollars are being spent on lobbying Congress every year, and that 1 out of every 10 of those dollars comes from foreign governments. As the U.S. continues its military dominance in the world, how much influence do outside governments wield over U.S. foreign policy decisions? Ben Freeman, national security investigator at the Project of Government Oversight, says that foreign governments go well beyond the sphere of influence with policymaking. He's the author of the new book called Foreign Policy Auction, where he writes the following. He says U.S. foreign policy is being sold, not just altered, shifted, or manipulated or influenced, sold. Every single day, the agents of foreign governments work to not only monitor U.S. foreign policy, but to actively change and even create it. They meet with policymakers, donate to their campaigns, write their speeches, and even write legislation. And he joins me now to talk about what this all really means. Ben, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to read one more quote that you said because I thought it was great. You said, "The fact is that every single day the agents of foreign governments are working to undermine U.S. foreign policy. The auction is always open. The only question is which country is buying your government today?" Ben, who are the major players undermining U.S. foreign policy today?
It's all the players you wouldn't hope to see. It's your Libyas, it's your Egypts, and it's not just the countries. It's the people and the dictators in those countries that are hiring our lobbyists, are hiring our public relations firms. So Mubarak, Egypt, features prominently in my book. Gaddafi features prominently in my book. Syria is in the book. All of these people who, most Americans, when they think of foreign policy, they think, well, who are the real boogeyman out there? Iran even has foreign lobbyists working in the U.S. And so whenever you think of who the sort of bad guys are in the world, chances are they've got a lobbyist fighting for them right now.
You know, I didn't even know that this was happening to the extent that you really lay out. It was really shocking for me. I mean, isn't this illegal? I mean, what are these legal caveats that people are going through to do this?
Yeah, unfortunately, in our current system, it's perfectly legal. If you're a foreign government, you're prohibited from making campaign contributions, so you can't directly donate money to U.S. elections. However, there's a really big loophole. You could simply hire a lobbyist, hire a public relations firm. As long as that person's a U.S. citizen, they're free to make all the contributions they want within the legal limits. But what happens all too often, what I found in the book, was they'll walk into a congressman's office, they'll say, hey, I'm here on behalf of Libya, I'm here on behalf of Gaddafi or Mubarak, and they'll have a conversation about what they want done. That very same day, they'll write a check. They'll write a $1,000, $2,000 check. And what's worse, they'll bundle that contribution with other people from their firm. So not only will they write a $2,000 check, they'll have other people at their firm write $1,000 checks, $2,000 checks, $500 checks. So by the end of the day, after one meeting, one congressman has a few $1,000s. Does that money come directly from the dictator? No. But is that money ultimately coming from the dictator? I think so.
Unbelievable. Do we know any specific legislation, or is it just kind of speculated that, you know, it's just so massively influenced that basically the legislation that we have toward Libya, Syria, all these countries is coming from the sphere of influence from the dictators?
There's a lot of specific legislation. One that really comes to mind for me is the example of Egypt. We're all familiar with the revolution that happened there. What a lot of people don't know is that we had lawmakers who saw that coming. McCain and Feingold, best known for campaign finance reform, a few months before the revolution broke out there, they saw it coming and they said, hey, we're going to introduce legislation to call out Mubarak for all these human rights violations, for everything he's doing to suppress his people. Well, obviously, the Egyptian government wasn't too happy with that. So what they had their lobbyists do, they had them stifle that legislation. I document a great case of how foreign lobbyists are able to really squelch good legislation but just a month before the revolution broke out there. Now, how might things have been different if we had said to the Egyptian people, hey, we're on your side, we understand this is a bad guy, and we put it on record, we support you? unfortunately, we'll never know because of foreign lobbyists.
And it just, all the rhetoric that we hear about foreign policy just really becomes kind of null and void when you know the underlying underhanded things that are going on, Ben. I wanted to talk about think tanks really quickly. The Atlantic Council, Bilderberg Trilateral Commission, all of these think tanks that have foreign policy prescriptions that they recommended the government sometimes put into place. And we see foreign heads of state, CEOs, corporate board members, as well as government officials sitting on these boards. How much do think tanks play a role in what you're talking about here?
They play a very important role. And what we're seeing from think tanks more and more is you're having much more of an international influence on those think tanks, like you mentioned. And it's an interesting sort of hybrid area because are they technically government entities?
Right.
Well, no. So do they have to register as foreign agents? Most people don't think so. And so if you don't have to register as a foreign agent, well, the reporting requirements are a lot less stringent. So unfortunately, we know even less about what these folks are doing than those people who do have to register as foreign lobbyists. So it's really, it's an even grayer area than what I focus a lot of my attention on. And I think it's going to be a much more important area going forward for foreign policy.
Certainly intertwined with the whole situation. Let's talk about oversight. Where is it?
Unfortunately, it's virtually non-existent. It's technically within the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice has a unit called the Foreign Agents Registration Unit. It's filled with wonderful people who are working their heart out to try and oversee this $500 million industry every year. $500 million spent on foreign lobbying in the U.S., yet we've got about a dozen people who are actually conducting meaningful oversight of it. So it's impossible to fully track everybody who's registered, let alone everybody who doesn't register. And so what we know, unfortunately, is frightening, but what we don't know, that's what's really scary. How many people are not registering? How many people aren't filing that should be? How many other, Irans and North Korean, whatever country that might scare you, how many of their agents are working here in the U.S., and we just simply don't know about it.
Right, and you say fewer than 10 people monitor the foreign lobbying for the U.S. government. Very shocking, Ben. Let's talk about the media blackout. I mean, this issue gets virtually no attention. As we know, Bahrain pays lobbying firms to pretty much advocate by proxy to bolster their image through agencies like CNN. I mean, how does this shape the media narrative when we have this kind of underhanded tactics going on for the corporate press? I mean, how are we supposed to find out that this is going on and really do anything about it?
Yeah, that's what really shocked me. When I first set out to write the book, I was so baffled that the media had ignored this for so long. That's why I was very happy for RT to have me on, of course. But the real shocking thing is that you have an issue in a nation that was founded on resistance to foreign influence has absolutely turned a blind eye to this foreign influence, this foreign money we have pouring into our elections, and just somehow we don't care about it. And you see it in the media. A lot of the money these firms spent, these countries, these dictators spent, is on public relations. It's trying to convince everybody in the U.S., oh, hey, I'm not a bad dictator. Yeah. I'm actually a good guy. Forget about all those human rights violations. Forget about all that torture stuff. And it really changes the public perception here. And it's so unfortunate because we're ignoring a lot of the suffering that's going on in the world, and we're undermining our own influence in the world.
Yeah, it's probably going on way more than we do know by proxy through these agencies. And it really reminds me of, as you just said, we're the good kind of dictator. We're the dictator that works with you. We put up this positive image of ourselves. And it reminds me of the MEK. The State Department just removed the MEK from the terrorism list. And then we have Hamas, the democratically elected leadership of Palestine. What is going on with that? I mean, it just seems like we throw around, this is the good kind of terrorist because it could potentially undermine the Iranian regime. These are the bad kind of terrorists. Talk a little bit more about the MEK and how you talk about that in your book.
The MEK is a great example, and I think it really goes back to a precedent that was set by Gaddafi and his foreign lobbying. So in the middle of the war on terror, Gaddafi is considered the #2 terrorist in the entire world for the U.S. And so how does that person, considered the #2 terrorist, has killed U.S. citizens, has even killed U.S. soldiers in terrorist attacks, suddenly in the middle of the war on terror gets pardoned? How does that happen? Foreign lobbying. How does that happen? Money, campaign contributions. And the MEK basically took that script and they said, well, what did Gaddafi do that was successful? he started lobbying aggressively. They took some other steps too. It's impossible to discount those. But the MEK went on a very aggressive lobbying campaign, and within just a couple of years was successful, gets taken off the terrorist watch list suddenly. And this is a group that we do know committed terrorist acts. We know for a fact that they did. And so you see the power of lobbying when you see these cases like the MEK, like Gaddafi's Libya. It really can fundamentally change the way that we perceive foreign policy, and it can change outcomes. And they're not always for the good, regardless of what you think about the MEK. Sure. This was not the decision we had before that lobbying effort started.
And it's bipartisan. I mean, we saw Howard Dean, John Bolton, I mean, all these people, tens of thousands of dollars lobbied by the MEK to speak on behalf of them. It really goes all across the board, and it really makes the rhetoric meaningless when you see the amount of money being funneled in to shape the narrative. Ben Freeman, thank you so much. Extremely important. Everyone check out your book. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.